God bless you. Have a good day.
Is that a poll up there?
Yeah.
Got it.
My name's Tony, by the way.
All right, I'm Devin.
Devin,
Yep.
do you have a couple minutes to talk about your answer?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Great. If you want to set your stuff down,
All right.
we'll make sure no one walks away with it. All right. So how did you determine the answer that individuals determine the standards for morality?
Well, are we talking about standards for morality in the sense of like what people believe people should and shouldn't do? Because
Yeah, the standard of right and wrong.
all right. I mean, it depends on how you're defining society. I would say.
Well, let's start with your answer,
All right.
the individual.
That's
So
just
let's
a
go by
collection
that.
of individuals, sure. So, I think
I'm sorry, your
should-
first name again is? I'm so
Devin.
old. Devin. Okay.
I think people should be able to do essentially whatever they want, provided they aren't materially harming anyone else, right? So.
Okay.
That, I mean, obviously that's a legal standard, not a moral standard. But I think if you, in the event that you were defining society as a collection of individuals, then sure, it will be society.
Okay. All right.
But
So
it happens at an individual level.
Okay.
Right? So.
All right. So let's work that out together a little bit. Okay. I'm going to assume, and I think I could do that with some assurance. I'm going to assume that Devin believes raping women is wrong.
Correct.
And I want to assure you that Tony believes it too.
Right.
In fact, I believe that a man who would do that to a woman deserves the death penalty. Okay,
Right.
so I have a wife of 33 years. I have 3 adult daughters. My youngest is a third-year student here, English major, and so I am firmly against any abuse of any kind against women.
Right.
Okay,
That's fair.
so you and I agree. Okay, let's say hypothetically, and I want to make sure I reassert, Tony does not believe any woman should be harmed in any way whatsoever. Okay?
Understood.
So let's say, though, hypothetically, you hold that position,
Right.
that women should not be harmed. I hold the position that it's okay.
All right.
If it's up to us as individuals to determine our own moral standards,
Right.
then you could not then impose your standard upon me and
Well,
say that I'm wrong.
Would endorsing something like that not be imposing your standard upon somebody else? Because if you go out and act upon that, then now you're violating somebody else's right to life, liberty, or property, right? So now you're enforcing your standard upon somebody else by actually committing an act like that.
Right.
If you hold
I
the
agree
rule-
with you.
Right.
Sure, I agree with you. But if the standards are determined by the individual, even if our standards disagree,
Right.
I cannot assert you're wrong because you're your own standard bearer.
I mean-
You can't assert I'm wrong because I'm my own standard bearer.
Right. Well, if we're talking about specifically, standards you hold in your head that you're not actually, acting upon, then I can absolutely get behind that.
Okay, but if you act upon it, that would be your bright line in the sand.
Right, exactly.
Okay, all right. So society, okay. Our society about 150 years ago, longer, determined that it was okay to subjugate people of color
Right.
and consider them property. Again, I'm going to assert with assurance, you and I agree that's wrong.
Correct,
Right?
absolutely.
Absolutely. Should have never have happened.
Right.
Okay? It did. Fortunately, our society has changed.
Right.
Okay. But it was the society's determination to make it legal to subjugate human beings.
Right.
Okay. Could another society that held a different standard, could they have imposed their will upon us because they disagreed with us?
Well, in what sense? I mean, when the
Like coming into our country and saying we're ending your society's belief that slavery is okay.
I mean, physically they could have.
But would have been right if each society is allowed to determine their own standard. Would it be right for another society to impose their standard on another society if it was truly up to the society to determine for themselves?
I would say no, because then
Okay.
they'd be infringing upon the rights of the individual. Would be my justification for saying that.
I'm sorry, I want to make sure I understand. You would say no, another society couldn't impose, or yes, a society could impose?
No, they couldn't, because
Okay.
they'd be infringing upon the rights of the individual.
Okay, all right. So yes, because a society is made up of individuals. Okay.
Right.
So then, walking that out a little bit,
Right.
I'm going to show you an inconsistency in that answer.
All right.
because I think you and I, again, I'm going to assert again with confidence, that you and I agree that what happened to the Jews and gypsies and homosexuals and blacks and the mentally and physically handicapped in Nazi Germany was wrong. Would you and I agree that that's yeah? Would you and I agree that's wrong?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Sure. Okay. But yet we determined as a society to impose our will upon that society. The German society determined as a nation through voting and through legislation to determine it was legal to massacre those people.
I would hold that the German society never had the authority to do that, because by doing that they were infringing upon the rights of the individual. They were putting individuals in death camps and outright killing them, and that's a violation of their individual rights.
I vote society.
Okay.
All right.
What do you guys vote?
I put individuals.
And I believe God. Yeah, and I'll explain. If my name's Tony.
My name's Drew.
Drew, good to meet you,
nice
Drew.
to meet you.
And Devin. Drew and Devin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we all put different answers here?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we all got different answers.
pretty
So,
awesome.
all right. So, I'm sure you guys are like on your way to class or something like that. So, I'd like to give you why I believe the standard for morality is God. Okay. If individuals are allowed to be the determiner of the standard for morality, we then as individuals can't tell another individual they're wrong. We might believe they're wrong, but we can't impose our will upon them, because each individual has the right to determine his own moral standard.
I would agree with that, though.
You would?
Yes.
Oh, okay, well then again, if you believe rape is wrong, and Drew, I've already made sure he knows that I believe rape is wrong, true.
I think we all do.
Too. Yeah, right. But if you believe rape is wrong, and that's what you've determined as a moral standard as an individual, and I've determined that rape is right, then you can't impose your will upon me if the individual determines the standard.
What are we counting as imposition of will, right? So if we both hold that, or so if I hold that it's wrong and you hold that it's right, right? I don't have a problem with that as is, right? Per se, by itself, I don't have a problem with that. But then if you go out and commit a crime like rape, then I would absolutely hold that I have the authority to prevent you from doing that, because when you do that, you're infringing upon another individual, the victim. You're infringing upon their right to liberty.
So then in that sense then, I don't have the freedom as an individual to determine a moral standard that's contrary to yours in that sense.
Hey, wait, doesn't this question assume that there are standards for morality?
Oh, there are. There certainly are. Sure.
It could all be subjective.
It can't all be subjective. Because Drew, I would assert it's wrong to lie.
Not in every situation. Nothing's wrong in every situation. There are times when it would be okay to do almost anything. Like if someone, I would say that it's wrong to steal, but if someone poisoned me, you have the antidote and you refuse to give it to me, I would argue that it'd be okay for me to steal it from you in order to survive.
See, I would disagree with that.
Subjective.
I would disagree with that.
It depends on the situation.
Yeah, but we're not. But there we're not talking about theft. We're talking about self-defense. Because you've extrapolated theft out to something more than what it was.
Why would you say that that's not theft?
Because you know that the person poisoned you,
but
and they have the antidote, and so they've harmed you.
Maybe someone else poisoned me, and then you've got the antidote, and you tell me that I can't have the antidote unless I give you $1 million, but I don't have $1 million. Is it okay for me to take the antidote from you anyway?
So Drew,
actually.
So Drew,
you'd say no to that?
Well, okay, so if he has the antidote and you're being poisoned, right, and he refuses to give it to you, is that a crappy thing to do? Sure. But I would say you never have, inaction can never be considered, not necessarily immoral. Inaction can never be punished, is what I would say, right? So I'm never going to say that because somebody refused to do something.
Maybe not according to society, because there are Good Samaritan laws. Which state that if a person does not act like a Good Samaritan, stop something that's going on in front of them, they cannot be held legally culpable for not doing that. Okay, so a society can determine that, but I would assert that because there is a higher standard than the individual and society, that it most certainly would be wrong for me not to render aid if I could. Because the standard that is above the individual and society, the standard that is determined by God, the standard that's been written on all of our hearts, says to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay? We all know that it's wrong. Look, we can come up with the wildest scenarios, right, to justify doing that which we know is wrong. Okay, but in the end, we know that rape is wrong, and so if you extrapolate out some theory, some hypothetical that will some way in your mind justify raping a woman, you're still going to be wrong for raping that woman, no matter what you've extrapolated in your own mind. We know that's wrong.
Guns in my head and told me that if I don't rape her, they're going to blow my
Then
brains
you should
out.
die.
And I should die.
Yeah, because the moral standard that's already been written on your heart is that you are to love your neighbor as yourself.
Well, I think the issue here is, to a certain extent, people hold different sets of morals, right? And as a result,
Oh, sure, that's true.
Some people claim to derive their morals from different levels, right? So I think if you say that one is objectively, I personally do claim to derive my moral standard from the fact that I, as an individual, have the right to do whatever I want, provided I'm not harming anyone else, right? But I think if you come up with an act such as rape that we all agree is morally wrong, right? Some people will say it's morally wrong because God. Some people will say it's morally wrong because society, and some people will say it's morally wrong because you're infringing on the right of an individual. So I think if there's a standard that we all agree on that something's immoral, I think you can derive that from any one of these three levels, and that's a personal belief that you have.
What I'm saying is that moral dilemmas exist. Like,
Right.
What's right?
Oh,
and
sure.
wrong is always.
Well, moral dilemmas do exist, but yet even in those moral dilemmas, there is an objective standard that's been written on each of our hearts.
I don't think that's true. I think
Well,
lots
it
of
is.
people that disagree with.
Oh,
with
sure.
it, yeah.
Oh, lots of people do disagree
Like
because
the trolley problem, like all these philosophy experiments where they're like, oh, is this wrong or not? And the trolley problem, the doctor problem where you have to take the organ. You heard of these?
yeah, sure, yeah,
And like
yeah.
try to save someone.
right.
Like,
It doesn't change the standard though. While there are dilemmas underneath the standard, it doesn't change the standard.
so you're saying that there is a right answer to these problems, but we just don't know what it is.
No, I say that there is a right answer to these problems, and that, I mean, it may be. Look, even in my own life, and I'm sure in your lives too, we wrestle with decisions. Is this right? Is this wrong? And sometimes we make the right choice, and sometimes we don't. But what I'm asserting, guys, is that if it's up to the individual or if it's up to society, then the standards are arbitrary. The standards are arbitrary, and they can fluctuate. They can fluctuate like the wind.
It's not necessarily
I was just
arbitrary.
talking to you.
Good talking to you too. Hey, God bless you, man. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I would contend that it's not necessarily arbitrary if it's up to the individual, because then at that point, as I've said, you only have a right to do whatever you want, provided you're not conflicting with another individual's right to do the same.
Okay.
Right. So it's
Well,
not
no.
entirely
See,
arbitrary.
now you've changed the narrative in a sense.
In what sense?
Devin? In the sense that you've added a caveat. Hi. How are you? God bless you. My name's Tony.
Hi.
And you are?
Faith.
Faith? Oh, I met Mercy, and now I've met Faith. That's wonderful. I'm sorry, Devin, I can't give you a. I mean, your name is a good name,
Yeah.
but
No, you're
Faith
okay.
and Mercy, you know where I am. Okay.
Yeah, no,
So
I
anyway,
got you.
all right. So anyways, so not to get too off track, but I want to go back to something you said,
Right.
and you've asserted it a few times, that you have the freedom as an individual to do whatever you want, so long as you're not hurting
Yeah.
another person.
Because
So-
hurting somebody would conflict with their right
okay.
to do the same.
Okay.
Right.
So let's say that Devin, and I'm not at all suggesting that Devin does or would do this, okay? This is purely hypothetical.
Right.
So, because this is going to be offensive.
Yeah,
All right, just want to let you know. You viewing child pornography on your computer is not, by that act alone, hurting anybody.
Right. The person who I would say produced it would be absolutely harming somebody.
Okay, but you viewing that pornography,
Right.
according to your standard that you gave me, that your moral standard is I could do whatever I want so long as I'm not hurting someone, you've just now assigned morality
Right.
to viewing child pornography.
Well, I would say
Now, would you agree with me, Devin, that it's wrong to view child pornography?
wrong in what sense? Should it
Well,
be
wrong. It's immoral.
All right.
Would you agree? Please, because Faith is really wanting to know what you're going to say. No, would you agree, turning on your computer and looking at pornographic images of children, would you agree that's wrong?
I would agree it's wrong in the sense that I wouldn't do it.
Oh, well, okay. So again, that's arbitrary, okay? Because if it's up to the individual, if it's truly up to the individual to determine their own morality, then the deviant, and that's what he is or she is, the deviant who is viewing child pornography can say, my moral standard makes it okay.
Well, I'm gonna take a very controversial stance here and say that if it's already been produced, I think the act of producing child pornography is absolutely harming the child, right? Can we agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
Right,
yeah, because a child
right.
must be subjugated to produce that. Absolutely.
So if it already exists, I don't object to somebody else having the authority, in a sense, to view it. Like, I disagree with it. I believe it's wrong personally, but if it's already been produced, I would not claim the authority to, you know, break into their house and stop them from doing it. If it's already been produced. I think the production of it is absolutely harming the child.
All right.
But if it's already in existence, I don't think viewing it does any further harm, provided, you know, it's already been...
It's actually, according to the standard I'm asserting, that God is the one who gives the standards for morality.
Right.
Your standard is immoral. Your standard is, that standard, what we're speaking of specifically, that standard is immoral. Because you are not loving your neighbor as yourself, and those children are your neighbors.
Right.
You're not loving those neighbors as yourself.
I don't believe children should be harmed. I don't believe that child pornography should exist. But after it already does, I don't think that some third party viewing it does any additional harm that's not already been done.
So, but God's standard is even if you're not committing the act, if you're endorsing an act that is in violation or contradiction to His law, you're just as guilty as the person who is committing the act.
Well,
that's the, again, we're talking about standards for morality.
Well, that's according to your moral standard, because you believe that
It's not according to my moral standard.
In what sense?
It's according to the standard that God has written on my heart, your heart, and Faith's heart. The three of us collectively and individually, we all know. Now, granted, Drew came up with some wild-eyed, you know, moral dilemmas, right? Okay,
poison,
right.
yeah.
But we all know that child pornography is wrong.
Right.
The three of us know that raping women is wrong. The three of us know that murder with premeditation and malice aforethought is wrong. We all know that stealing just because we want to take someone's stuff is wrong. Look, if Faith were my wife, she's young enough to be my daughter. But if Faith were my wife, and she comes out of the bathroom, we're going to go out to dinner, and she says, "Honey, how do I look?" And I think Faith is wearing stuff that does not make her look attractive. Okay? All right? But I'm going to lie to Faith and say, "Honey, you look amazing." And why am I doing that? Not because I love her as myself, but out of self-preservation. I don't want to sleep on the couch tonight. Right? But the loving thing to do is, if I think Faith is going to walk out of the house and potentially embarrass herself by the way she's dressed, if I truly care about her and love her as my wife, regardless of what the personal consequences may be, I'm going to lovingly say, "Faith, you're beautiful, but what you've done with your hair today, you're beautiful, and I think you ought to just wear your hair the way you always wear it." You know, or "Faith, you know, you're beautiful, but you've got mascara running down your face." She put on her mascara without a mirror. She doesn't know. But I said, "Oh, honey, you look great. You look fabulous." And I let her walk out of the house that way. I'm doing it because I love myself more than I love Faith. These standards are written on our hearts. They're not arbitrary, they're not subjective standards. They are absolute moral standards that have been written on our heart because we were all created in the image of God. And the God who created us is not a liar, as so many of us are, is not a thief like some of us are, is not an adulterer at heart like some of us are, or in act or deed. God equates hatred with murder. Think about it. Murder begins in the heart, moves to the mind where it formulates a plan, and to the hand where it may or may not carry out the act. But the murder began in the heart. So harboring bitterness or resentment or hatred in our heart for someone else, God equates that with murder. And we know we shouldn't hate people. We know we shouldn't hate people because of the color of their skin, or because of their gender, or because of what country they live in. We shouldn't hate people because of what they may or may not have done to us or for us. We know that because God has written that standard on our heart. It's an objective standard. It's a standard that doesn't come from an individual. It's a standard that doesn't come from a society. It's a standard that comes from the perfect, holy, and just God who created us. Now, here's the problem. We've all violated that standard, right? I've lied. I've stolen. I've taken God's name in vain. I've harbored bitterness and resentment in our heart towards other people. I'm 54 years old. I have not lived a perfect day in my life. But yet Jesus said you are to be perfect as your Heavenly Father is perfect. I can't live up to that standard. God, who created us, is holy and righteous and just. And we're one day going to stand before Him to give an account for all the times that we have violated His law in thought, word, or deed. And He's just, He's holy. And the punishment He's determined for violating His law is eternity in hell. The good news, the wonderful news is that that doesn't have to be our lot, because God has provided a way for us to escape that just and holy wrath, not by bribing God with religion, not by bribing God with good works, not by denying the existence of the God we know. That's like a criminal going into a courtroom and the judge saying, I find you guilty. Well, judge, I'm not guilty because I don't believe you exist. You can't judge me. I don't believe you exist. He has provided one way for us to escape His just and holy wrath, and that was through the gift of His Son. 2,000 years ago, God the Father sent His Son to earth in the person of Jesus Christ, truly God, truly man, without sin. Unlike us, who haven't lived a perfect day in our lives, as God in the flesh, He was perfect in every respect, thought, word, deed, and He lived that perfect life for some 33 years. And at a time appointed before the foundation of the world, God the Son voluntarily went to a Roman cross. He suffered and died a death He did not deserve, to take upon Himself the punishment we rightly deserve for our untold number of sins against God. And then He forever defeated sin and death when He rose from the grave. See, the dilemma, which actually isn't one, God has promised to punish sinners. God has promised to punish lawbreakers because He's good. But yet at the same time, He also promises to forgive and save sinners. So how can He do that? How can He be perfectly just and condemn the wicked, and perfectly merciful and kind and save the wicked? It happened at the cross. That's where justice and mercy kissed. God the Father made God the Son, who knew no sin, to be sin on our behalf, so that through Him we might receive His righteousness. Instead of, if our faith and our trust is in Christ alone for our salvation, when we stand before God, instead of seeing our sin, He will see the righteousness of His Son. And it's on the basis of what His Son did on behalf of sinners like us that we could be set free. It is not unlike a judge sentencing you to death for your crime, and then instead of you going to the gas chamber or being strapped to a gurney to be put to sleep, He goes and takes your place. The requirements of the law was death for the crime committed. He took the death that was supposed to be imposed upon you. And so it is by that act of mercy and grace, a legal transaction takes place, and He no longer sees you guilty of committing that crime because of what His Son did on behalf of sinners.
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said. I have about 3 objections to that. I do have to go at some point. But,
sure.
I won't. Just
I appreciate your time.
Like I won't try to get the last laugh.
Not a drive-by. Okay.
Well, no, I'll say what I'm going to say, and then
okay.
You can absolutely respond.
Sure. Okay. And I'm interested in your thoughts too, Faith, if you have the time.
And then you can come help out with the speech ball afterwards. Sorry about the delay on that. So
Oh, you do know each other?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
We're gonna be pumping up the beach ball.
Ah, okay.
So the first thing is I would say that if I think I already said some variation of this before, but if we all agree on some sort of moral standard, for instance, murder being wrong, I think if it is truly some sort of consensus that we can all pretty much, with the exception of, maybe a few people agree on, you can justify it by saying that the standard exists at any level, right? So I can say murder is wrong because if you murder me, you are infringing upon my individual right to life, right? I can say that murder is wrong because society has determined it's wrong, and I can say that murder is wrong because God set the objective standard that it's wrong, right? So I think if there's any sort of moral consensus, we can justify it at any given level, and because of that, we're all able to have these moral standards, right? And I think that it's pretty convenient that we can set our own moral standards at any given level and pretty much have order in what we're doing. So I think I think it is determined by the individual, though. So if we're in a group society, right, I think pretty much any act that we can agree is wrong can be traced back to the individual. But that can be justified at any level. And the other thing I would say, this is a bit separate from that, but you mentioned that the sort of transaction of Jesus dying on the cross was not unlike a judge, sentencing you to death and then going to the gas chamber on your behalf. But if God sets an objective standard and is omnipotent, why would that transaction have to take place? So that's sort of like that seems a bit vengeful on his behalf. Like that sounds like something a mafia leader would do. You guys transgressed upon me, you deserve punishment. I'll just send my own son in to die instead. Why can't nobody die?
Okay. May I?
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, I want to, you let me talk for a while. I want to make sure I'm respectful and I don't interrupt.
Yeah.
So, what you've asserted is really common. Not that makes it unimportant.
Right.
I'm just saying that is a question that is often asked.
Right.
Okay. The problem with the question is the presupposition from which that question comes. The presupposition is man is good, and if God is good, man is going to receive good from God because man is good. That's a presupposition that is faulty. The reality is, according to God's standard of moral perfection, none of us are good. Devin's not good, Faith's not good, Tony's not good, because we fail to live according to his standard, okay? So it's not a mafioso simply determined to arbitrarily kill someone for their own personal benefit.
Right.
It is a just judge applying his perfect standard to those who have violated it. Just like a judge in a courtroom provides the imposes the standard of the law upon those who broke it, okay? Every human being, all of us were born with sin natures. All of us have sinned against God. All three of us. God would be perfectly just if he wiped out every sinner on the planet because we've all broken his law. But because he is, and he would be good, and he would be good to do that because he would not be hypocritically violating his own standard, okay? But God is also merciful and gracious and kind. Think about this. President Trump, or any other president, has the legal authority to pardon convicted criminals. They don't answer to the legislature. They don't answer to the electorate. They don't answer to society. They, for whatever reason they determine, can pardon criminals. Now, where this breaks down is that every single president is a fallible, sinful human being.
Right.
And they can be corrupt, and they can let people go for corrupt reasons, okay? Right. So I grant that, okay?
Absolutely.
But he has the legal authority to pardon whoever he wants. So 10 names are presented to him, all of them guilty of the same crime. He pardons one of the 10. Was he unjust to the other 9?
Depends on what the crime was.
No, all the same crime. All this.
I would say it depends on what the crime was.
Okay, well, let's say murder.
All right.
Okay, let's say murder. All are convicted of murder. All are sentenced to life in prison. And he determines, I'm going to let number 1 go. Number 2 through 10 will continue to serve their sentences. Was he unjust to the 9 that he did not let go?
Not necessarily.
No, he wasn't, because they're receiving what they deserve as their punishment. He was merciful to 1. He determined to grant mercy to 1. Didn't deserve it. Mercy is not receiving what you deserve. Grace is receiving what you don't deserve. He was gracious and merciful to one. Okay? God, however, not being arbitrary, has determined that every sinner will face death, will face eternity in hell as a just punishment for their sin. He can't just arbitrarily be merciful and say, I'm going to let you go just for no reason whatsoever. The law has to be satisfied, right? And the way he did that was by sending his son to earth to die on behalf of sinners, so that those who by faith receive him as their Lord and their Savior will receive the grace and mercy and forgiveness of God, not because of anything they've done to earn it, but because of God's grace and mercy that would allow his son to die on behalf of sinners.
Okay, understood. Well, it was great talking to you.
Good talking to you too, Devin. Yeah, thank you for your time.
I hope I was, respectful. And
no, it was, you know what?
much.
No, it was a wonderful. This is exactly the kind of conversations I hoped and prayed I would have today. It was wonderful. I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I really do. Faith, any thoughts? I know you two are probably going to run off together, but what do you think about all this?
I'm fairly religious, so I do agree with it.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Okay. So the beach ball is for what?
It's actually for free speech on campus. So,
Are you? No kidding.
yeah, what you're doing here, yeah. So,
Well, that's fabulous.
essentially, what we do is we let people write whatever we want on it. We're Young Americans for Liberty, so we support. In case you couldn't tell.
I see one on there that's pretty libertarian. Yeah.
People exercise as much liberty as they want.
Yeah.
So basically, we support constitutional rights on campus, and the big one is free speech. So every
Wow.
once in a while, we'll pump that up, let people write anything protected by the First Amendment. So everything except imminent incitement of violence, pretty
Sure.
much.
Well, which isn't protected.
Libel and slander. All
Right.
that fun stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Well, I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
That helps me.
Yep. Absolutely. You can continue doing this.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
good.
again, it was good talking to you.
Yeah, good talking to you. Faith, very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
God bless you. You both have a great day, and I hope that goes well for you.